Hello, friends. Welcome to the Merry Corncrakes. My name's Nathan Hood. I will be your host today. And this is the video or podcast associated with the Corncrake magazine. Go now to corncrakemag.com to read this month's issue, filled with great stories from English history, English literature, both past and present. Today, I have a very exciting topic with a brilliant guest. We're going to be talking about how do you write women? And to do that, I have none other than the editor of the Corncrake. Hello, Shieldmaiden. Hello, Shieldmaiden. How are you doing?
Hi, yeah, I'm going well.
That is good. That is good. Thank you for joining today. And yes, let's just get straight into this question. How do you write women well when you're coming to a story? How do you do it?
Well, it's like any element of writing. You need to write about the things you know. If someone's writing about steam trains or they're writing about space travel or anything really, the thing that makes it a good story that makes sense is when people are writing about things they know and understand. And so I think the best way to get women right is to, know things, understand women's behavior and know how they would react in different situations and that sort of thing. And when you have that as a basis, then your female characters are going to be believable.
So how do you then build up that knowledge, I guess, would be a question. And maybe that's what every man is asking in the audience. How do you identify these distinctive things that maybe need to be translated into a story?
Well, hopefully people speak with women in their everyday lives and have women in their lives. So, I mean, you can always, I suppose, ask them about how they would react in situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's true. I think maybe it's worth kind of taking a step back and kind of posing the problem in a way, because I think it's very easy to try and write women as if they were men, at least for many male authors, including myself, because obviously that's what we know best, right? We know how men think, and even though each man is different, there's certain types of responses to situations we can imagine, we can feel, we have been there ourselves. And so when it comes to writing a woman, it's very easy then to just write as if they have a male brain and a male heart and respond in the ways a man would. So could you say a little bit about, have you seen that in stories, and what are the kind of mistakes being made there?
Well, yeah, as you mentioned, some men are writing as if women are just like, men in a different body type, so kind of thing. But then there's also, of course, men who have some kind of women, so they're writing the women as some kind of empty-minded creature because it makes their male character look better or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different motivations behind poorly written female characters. But I mean, like, one of the things about writing is that one of the ways it makes you a better writer is reading good literature. And of course, if you were to read well-written literature and those female characters are in there, then you're kind of learning more about women through reading it. And of course, you have to make sure that you're reading Jane Austen or Charles Dickens and not 007. What is that character's name? James Bond. Yeah. I wouldn't recommend anyone read James Bond and then use that as a blueprint for women. But go like read Charles Dickens stories or Jane Austen. And these people have a good understanding of women. Because, it really is with writing. All writers need to be reading a lot of good literature because that influences you. And understanding everything about women in one's real life isn't possible. But so reading well-written literature will give you new experiences. You just have to, make sure that the literature is well-written. There's a lot of stuff out there, but not all of it's good.
Well, maybe it'd be worth making a comparison here. You know, you mentioned James Bond. What does James Bond get wrong in its presentation of women? Because from a man's point of view, you know, many men love James Bond in part because it's a kind of male fantasy, or you get to be the spy going around the world, super intelligent, super physically fit, very attractive to the women he meets, who all want to fall in love with him, right? So, from a man's point of view, James Bond, although he's not a realistic character, he sums up an ideal for many men. So, why then are the women in that not well written women?
Well, they're there to serve a purpose. They don't necessarily, they're being written in to suit the main character. They're supporting characters. They're to prop up the ego of the main character. They're not really stories written where the characters have their own opinions and ideas, where the story could play out in numerous different ways as you're writing. Like the end, like would any of these characters ever do anything that would harm the fantasy of the story? Very unlikely. They wouldn't be allowed to do that. So the story is just, as you said, it's a fantasy, and that's all it is. So if someone wants to write just a fantasy, like, that's up to them. But if people actually want a well-written story, then, you know, the James Bond style is not it.
So in a way, the women they're almost like 2D cutouts who are just there for James Bond, but they don't have any kind of character growth or aims or ambitions or a journey of their own to go on. They're not real people, in a sense.
Yeah, they're just there to... They might as well be a car or a gun or a suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another accessory for James Bond.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, you know, you've mentioned that it's not just writing, you know, treating them as a character with their own motivations and goals and challenges, but then also somebody might try to do that, but then still write them as if they are a man having motivations and goals and aspirations. So how would you, what might be something that somebody would make a mistake in that regard that maybe you've seen in somebody's writing, and how would you change it?
I was reading a story once and I stopped and I was like, what is this stupidity? And then I went and read the author, and it was a man. I was like, this makes sense. So basically the woman was planning to go on she's going out to have brunch with her girlfriend, and she's looking over her wardrobe in a panic because she had nothing fashionable to wear to a brunch with the girls because she'd been in a relationship for so long. And this was utter stupidity to me. Like, what woman... Well, she's not going on a date. So, like, what do you mean being in a relationship means you don't have clothes to wear when you're going out with other women? And also, like, the whole situation was just so ridiculous.
So, but let's kind of zero in on this. What then would a woman be thinking as they're getting dressed for brunch?
The longevity of your relationship has nothing to do with fashionable clothing which you would wear out with other women. Lots of women are in relationships and they still go shopping. It's a bit silly to suggest as soon as you get into a relationship you don't think about fashion and clothes anymore. And if a woman were in a relationship, okay, maybe she doesn't have clothes to wear to a club or a party, okay, that arguably might be a realistic thing. But the idea you can't in the middle of the day go to lunch because you don't have clothes for that because you've been dating someone for 7 years, like, that is not making sense. Like, if you actually look at women out together at lunch midday, they're not wearing extraordinarily abnormal outfits, you know? So that just shows that writer was completely out of touch with the reality of women's closets and connecting far too much importance in a way to the past relationship.
So it overestimates the impact of the relationship, perhaps in a way that it does impact men. Certainly in relation to clothing, there's typically the joke of, the woman, the girlfriend, the wife is doing the husband's wardrobe, but then if he ever leaves, then he's back on his own, and his clothes are not what they were before, or something to that effect. So in a way, it's kind of importing that sort of idea into the woman's point of view, which doesn't carry across in that kind of situation.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it must be that, because like I don't understand everything about men. I'm not going to lie. That's why I don't really write about men and their wardrobes.
Well, I mean, maybe that's the point then, in terms of if you're going to write about something, it's good to draw on actual experiences you've had, with women, for example, and seeing their different reactions in those contexts, rather than something that you don't have any knowledge of at all.
Because I think when they're writing these characters, they're earnestly writing their piece, and they think it makes sense. They're just so far inside their own heads and out of touch with women that they end up writing something a bit silly. Because that is not like, I rather read silly things like that than read the absolute travesty, which is the women in James Bond. Not gonna lie.
Well, there's a distinction there, isn't there? One's trying to give a character, the other is just using them as a prop.
Yeah, the woman in this story was in charge of herself as a person, even though she was having an odd moment in front of her wardrobe.
And you've already mentioned a couple of examples, so like Jane Austen and Charles Dickens, that actually reading these sorts of authors can give you an insight into a really well-written female character.
Because for any story, reading gives you experience with words, and also inspiration, but also other characters and how characters are written. Really recently, I just came across, I think C.S. Lewis had written a letter in response to a schoolgirl who had written to him being like, so how can I be a better writer? And as I mentioned earlier in this recording, one of the things he said, write about the things you're passionate about, the things you know. And that means that, well, he didn't say if you're a boring person, you'll have nothing to write about, but that's basically what he meant. So the other point that C.S. Lewis was making was that reading widely is a good thing as well, because if you're reading good literature, it will influence you, and that will influence your writing style, because we as humans are influenced by things. So if we're reading well-written characters, then we will be influenced by what we're reading, so we will write better.
So that's a really good point, because it's often, I think when it comes to writing, we think about the actual craft of writing primarily in, okay, how do I improve my language skills? How do I improve my editing skills? How do I improve building a world? We don't think of, okay, actually all the time where we're not thinking about writing, when we're consuming or engaging with other media, other stories, that's actually informing us as writers and shape us as writers as well. So everything becomes the whole of your life is impacts your writing ability.
Because we're influenced by the things we're doing in our downtime. You know, if you're in a shop and German music is playing, you're going to be tempted to buy Lederhosen and not so much a Halloween pumpkin. Whereas if it's Halloween time and there's some spooky noises playing in the shop, something you're going to want to buy, you know, maybe a pumpkin spice latte or something. You know, you're always influenced by these things. So making sure that your influences are good ones, good literature in this case, then it's inevitably going to influence you.
I remember the graphic novelist Alan Moore saying that art is magic because it manipulates the way that you think, the way that you behave. And it's exactly what you just described, with stories and music as well. And all of the arts, they can have that impression upon you in ways you're not even conscious of. I always think of the example of when I was a teenager, I played this game, Grand Theft Auto, where you're basically a gangster robbing people and doing awful things. And they swear a lot in the game. And when I played it for some time,
you started swearing?
I started swearing more. And when I stopped playing the game, I stopped swearing as much. So it was.
I have to
it was
not
profound.
think swear words, or that makes me start to swear.
Yeah. So then you can then apply this across to this discussion. So if you're watching James Bond movies all the time, or something of that effect, something which treats women in such a way. So I would add into this something like pornography, let's say. If you're watching that, for example, that treats women as very 2D. They're there to serve a man's pleasure. Then you're going to be writing women who do not have depth and do not have character.
Yeah, and that's the thing you mentioned. It's a bit of magic. Like, obviously, I see a lot of stories coming through the Corncrake in the submissions box. When people have creativity, they can have awkward sentences. They can have long paragraphs. They can have sentences that run so long they turn into a. They can have awkwardly named main character. They can have problems, and it's okay if the story is a good one. But how to make someone who has no creativity, you just can't work with that. So, yeah, if someone can have that magic, and they can make a well-written story, that's kind of they've done most of the work, because as long as they aren't an arrogant person, they'll be open to edit suggestions. They will be learning, and then you just polish it up. But they have to have that creativity has to be there, because I just don't think. I think that's why modern publishing is so terrible, because people who don't have much life experiences, who haven't been reading good literature, are producing literature to a fault. Okay, this page number of books, this number of books in a series, we need this many characters. They need to experience this and this with this identity. It's all down to a formula. It's not creativity, and it's terrible, and that's why publishing is awful.
Yes, and that's the opposite of the Corncrake, which is, from my own experience of submitting stories, it's very supportive of, if you have a bit of creativity, a bit of imagination, the editing team are really great in helping you turn that into a really good story. So I think you're exactly right. And kind of on that note, I want to kind of, by way of maybe a last question, actually, we've been talking about how to write women, but obviously you yourself are a woman, and the stories that you have written in the Corncrake, the Degore series, many of these focus on men or boys. So when you come to writing, males, how do you go about it, and what have been some of the challenges for you to do that?
Well, I think it depends on personality. Like, I'm not the agreeableness scale. I'm not the most agreeable of women, so this puts certain aspects of my personality more closer to the dudes. So I think there's just something that helps pause, because I'm not having these dudes behaving like women. I guess before any of my intellectual powers come into it on a biological level, I've got my characters there already. If I just write them like I'd write myself, they're always part of the way there. So that helps a lot. And then it's just, I think, my personal life experiences, I've done physical labor types of jobs a lot. And that kind of gives whoever's doing it a man or a woman, a kind of practical outlook on life. So those things help me a lot, because I'm not writing about, it's hard to describe what these female things are. Like, I don't write male characters who scream when they see spiders. I don't write male characters who are incapable of being blunt, But then on top of that, of course, I have read a wide variety of stuff, and because I'm reading all this, I'm seeing how men behave, how they respond to things, I've been going through ghost stories, audiobooks of ghost stories. And obviously, even though these are ghostly things that are supposed to chill your bones, they still have male characters in there who are reacting. And these men are not throwing up their hands and screaming as soon as they see the smallest thing that freaks them out. Now, if they were women, they might be, and fair enough. I'm not here to critique women's behaviour, but men wouldn't do that. And so I'm continuously, story after story, men are reacting. And the men in the stories react differently, but they're reacting in certain ways. So when I bring that into my writing, they're not some extreme kind of thing which men would read and be like, yeah, this is acting like a woman, just because, combination of life experiences and then my reading, good quality reading.
Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, I would say as well, you do a good job though of not going the complete other way and doing a kind of extreme version of masculinity, which doesn't exist either. And so I think that's, in a way, this is partly where the conversations be going, in terms of it's about trying to find that balance between the stereotype, which is just in a degraded form of masculinity or femininity, but also trying to find something which feels more lifelike, and that will have variations within it.
All of the things I read, whether it's Jane Austen or Charles Dickens or the ghost stories of M.R. James, every single character has nuance. They have personalities. They react differently in different situations. So if this is my reading material, it would kind of be impossible for me to write some kind of enormously macho man, because, well, literally none of these stories show that without showing what a man pays for by being that way.
I think one final thing I wanted to just draw out from what you said, because we've spoken a bit about reading good literature, we've spoken about observing women in your life, but one of the things you mentioned was actually just who you are as a person and your qualities as a person. And as somebody like Carl Jung would say that all of us have a masculine and feminine aspect to our characters. And of course, for a male, you're going to have more masculinity than a female would, but there are feminine attributes that you have in your life. And so even being aware of those or seeing them in your own life can help you then writing a more feminine character than yourself. So I thought that was a really interesting point, especially when you were saying about how your disagreeableness makes you closer to a male character, for example. So I thought that was a really interesting thing. Just some self-awareness can help, some introspection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it can, and I think what you choose to read is also. I know there's a bit. I've been talking a bit of a separation between one's personal character traits and what one is reading, but I think at the end of the day they do combine, because what you're choosing to read is, it's a decision you're making, influencing your personality, and it's brought about by your interests. So. The two become the same thing, really.
It can heighten certain aspects of your character if you're engaging them more with a certain kind of literature or music. Definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let us bring things to a close there. I think that's been a good discussion. And before we head out, Shieldmaiden, is there anything that you would like to promote? Where can people read more of your stories?
Well, everyone should check out the Corncrake magazine, corncrakemag.com.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of interesting things in this November issue. My Dagor story, Without a Home. So it is almost over. The last one will be in December. So that's when it's finally over. But for the rest of my stuff, I might publish a short story here and there next year. But this long series finished soon. So if you want to read it, all of the issues are on the website, so you can read the whole thing if you want.
Excellent. And all that remains for me to say then is thank you so much for joining. It's been a great conversation, and I'm so glad of your time and your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
And thank you, dear viewer, and we shall see you soon for another episode of the Merry Corncrakes. Bye for now.